Sydney, what do you think of euthanasia?
Well, I personally think that when a owner comes in with their animal, and if their animal is completely fine and healthy, I would not be willing to perform euthanasia on that animal. But I understand that in certain situations, euthanasia is necessary if the animal's personal well-being is not sustained and the animal needs to be put to sleep instead of being in pain all the time.
Okay. How do you deal with stress, and have you ever lost your cool?
So I personally deal with my stress through my hobbies. So I really like painting, so I spend a lot of my free time working on art, and I also like reading books and watching a lot of TV. And I have lost my cool a few times because school can get really overwhelming, but when that happens, I just take some time to myself and really let myself relax, and then I really like planning out my days, so I will take the time to plan out my week to make it seem a little bit less overwhelming.
How do you plan on dealing with the expenses associated with that school?
So I actually received a scholarship for my undergraduate career, which has really helped me because I haven't had any student debts for undergrad. So I'm hoping to work a lot over the summers to save up some money, and I have some money saved up that I was planning on using for undergrad. But I understand that vet school is really expensive and I will have to take out some loans, but I think I have a good enough plan to get myself through that.
Okay. What effect will global warming have on veterinary medicine?
So I was actually recently doing a project in my English class about the effect of global warming on polar bears, because polar bears are my favorite animal, and I learned a lot about how global warming has caused a lot of the sea ice to melt, which makes the polar bear litter sizes smaller. It makes them have higher metabolic costs and things like that. So I personally want to be a zoological veterinarian, so a lot of the animals that I would be working with will be impacted by global warming. So I'm actually really passionate about making sure that I do my part to be more sustainable and to prevent global warming.
What will you do if you don't get into vet school?
If I don't get into vet school, I think that I would take a gap year and work on the parts of my application that I didn't feel like were the strongest. And I would also take time to maybe work in a clinic and get some more experience before reapplying.
Okay. Describe your research experience and how it has contributed to your future goals.
So in high school, I worked at the Derbyshire lab at Duke University, and I did a project on Toxoplasma gondii in cats, and that was actually an amazing experience for me because I never thought that I would be interested in working in a lab. Like, that environment never really appealed to me, but after doing research for the first time, I realized I actually do really like finding out new things and experimenting with things that people have no background in. And so I really hope to do more research in undergrad and also maybe in grad school if I don't get into vet school.
How will you decide what school to choose?
Definitely cost is the major aspect of my decision, but also I really like the temperature down here. North Carolina, I wouldn't really want to be up north where it's really cold just because of personal preference, and also I want to be closer to my family because they mean a lot to me, and my sister's really young, so I still want to be able to see her grow up.
So tell us a little bit more about yourself. What makes you stand out?
Well, I think a lot of the students here at NC State focus on more industry animals or companion animals, which is what I thought I wanted to do coming in. But then I had more experience with Dr. Campbell in the zoology department, and that got me really interested in looking more at exotics and wildlife.
Okay. How do you deal with getting bad grades in undergrad?
So when I get a bad grade, obviously I get really upset at first and I blame it a lot on myself, but then I've realized recently that there's no point in destroying myself over a bad grade because there's nothing I can do at that point to change it. other than do better on the next test. So instead of focusing a lot of energy on not doing so well on the first test, I might just find new study methods and do a lot better on the next one.
So you said you like to do your hobbies when you're stressed. Do you have a particular person you like to turn to when you're stressed?
I would say my best friend. He knows me really well and knows how to calm me down like when I am really stressed, and it's really nice to just have someone that really understands you to talk to. And also my family, obviously. I call them a lot when I'm stressed, and they kind of provide me with like a reality check, because I'm like, oh, this 85 is gonna ruin my chances into getting into vet school, and they're like, that is one grade out of like thousands of grades you're gonna get throughout undergrad, so it really doesn't matter that much, which I personally, like, I wouldn't be thinking that, but once they say it, I'm like, yeah, you're right, that's true.
Have you ever castrated an animal?
I have not, but I have talked to a lot of my friends in animal science who have, and the experience sounds very interesting, and I definitely want to be able to do it sometime in my life.
You said you want to work in zoological medicine. If you don't go into a private practice, how would you develop that career?
I'm really interested in working in like a zoo or for the government maybe, because I'm also really passionate about like animal rights and animal welfare and making sure that endangered species are protected. So I would be willing to work basically for all types of different organizations dealing with like endangered species and that type of thing.
Can you tell us the difference between animal rights and animal welfare?
So animal rights is more, I guess some people would say it's more like the extreme version of animal welfare, because it's more like if people don't believe that animals should be eaten or if they shouldn't be used in research, things like that. While animal welfare is more like we know that we use animals for food consumption and for research, but we need to make sure that they have good living environments and they're receiving enough care to not be feeling in pain all the time.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming in today. We'll get back to you shortly.
Thank you.
Welcome. So one of your first questions, what will you do if you don't get into vet school?
Well, I'm definitely going to reapply again the next year if I don't, but I will probably end up taking a gap year and trying to build up my resume and my application a little bit more, and also try to prepare myself financially a little bit better. So that I'll probably be working in a vet office or possibly even developing my nutrition side of my career, and maybe working in industry, maybe with USDA or any other government pet food industries. And then just trying to build on that and possibly also fix my grades if that's not as great, boost my GPA a little bit. But yeah, that would be it.
So if you do get into vet school, how will you decide which school to choose?
I, of course, love North Carolina, and it's where I'm from, so that's always going to be my first choice. But I would definitely want to stay down south. I enjoy the climate here. All of my family is here, and there are a lot of great vet schools within the South that I think I could really benefit from. And also, I just cannot stand cold weather personally. My personal preference is definitely warmer, but I like to experience all climates, and since in-state tuition will be cheaper financially, I'll definitely want to go with that option as my better option, and that'll probably also determine what other schools I look at out of state. Will be my financial situation.
How do you deal with stress?
Personally, I like to work out mostly because it kind of releases endorphins and just melts your stress away a little bit, but I don't always have that option, so I'll sit and listen to music, just give myself like 10-15 minutes just to relax and calm down. If I can get near an animal and pet an animal, I will do that. But that's not always the case, especially if I'm on campus. But I will definitely clear my mind somehow. That could also be through just like few minutes of meditation. But anything that will let me forget about whatever I'm stressed about and just clear my head and push everything else away.
What do you think of the roles both women and men play in business today?
I think men and women both are important because it's two very different viewpoints at the world, and both viewpoints are very much needed, and they're needed equally. And so I would say that currently women are not as represented in business settings, but I think that is on an uphill status at the moment, and that'll be completed especially by the time I become a working individual out of college. But I think having both those viewpoints is extremely important for having a equal workplace and equal minds being spoken.
What does diversity and inclusion mean to you?
Diversity to me is anything from different races, your different genders, your sexual orientation, your social status, and I think inclusion would be that all of those things are considered, but not a deciding factor in who you are as a person. It's just a part of you, but it's not what defines you. But yeah.
Do you think you are a diverse applicant?
Personally, I do, especially as someone from a rural community and a woman entering into a bigger city and a profession, even though that this profession is mostly women, since women in general have not been as represented, I think that makes me stand out.
So earlier you talked about how you deal with stress. Who do you turn to when you're stressed?
A little bit of a cliche answer, but definitely my mom. I would be very sad whenever anything bad happens to her because I don't know what I'd do without her. She's been there through every bad thing that's happened to me, and she's always who I call right away. Even if I have other family members with me, she's the only person I want to talk to about whatever is bothering me. And she's helped me through many childhood illnesses, from like my epilepsy I had as a kid to sleep apnea where I couldn't breathe at night. She's always been there, and so I think she'll always be my person that'll be there for me.
What will you do with a DVM if you don't go into private practice?
I really am interested in nutrition of animals, and so I think I would want to go into the industry of pet food or just other food animal regulation, and kind of explore fixing the problems that we currently have in the pet food industry with like misinformation from some veterinarian endorsed products that may not actually be. And I'd want to spread knowledge that is accurate and will actually help animal owners.
What do you think of euthanasia?
I think it's a necessary evil. It is not something that I would ever take lightly. And if there was an animal that came in that was perfectly healthy, maybe just had a behavioral issue, I would never, ever be able to euthanize them. And if anyone had asked me to do that, I definitely wouldn't. I would fight every way that I could to save that animal, because every animal deserves to be saved, because no animal is inherently bad in any way. So that should never be a thought when euthanizing an animal.
How do you plan on dealing with the expenses of vet school?
Thankfully, I have very, very, very nice parents that have said they're going to help me with my expenses, but I'm going to try my best to work while I'm in vet school to help pay along with that. And I will probably have to take out some loans, but I will do my best to make that as little as possible, because as we all know, student debt is very, very hard to get rid of. And so I would like to have as little student debt as possible to my name.
Have you ever castrated an animal?
I have not. It seems like an experience I would really like to have, just because I feel like you would like to say you've castrated an animal. We're like, wow, that's very different. But I've had many friends and colleagues who have, and they say that it's very strange, and I would love to see it for myself.
So tell us a little bit more about yourself. What do you think makes you a good candidate?
I think I am a very different candidate because I did not start off at a four-year university. I started off at a community college and transferred my way in. I was also not accepted into a four-year university my first go round, and I think that shows that I have determination and persistence, and that I know when I'm meant to be in a certain place.
Well, thank you so much for coming in today. We'll get back to you shortly.
Hey there, how are y'all?
Good.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, let's start this off. Alright, what will you do with a DVM if you don't go into private practice?
Okay, first and foremost, I want to be a food animal vet and be specifically working with poultry. And so I don't want to go into private practice. That is not my first choice because I have really been immersed through majoring in poultry science here at NC State in all that the poultry industry and the food animal industry in general has to offer, and just how underserved it really is. A lot of parts of veterinary medicine are really women heavy, but the food animal industry and specifically the poultry industry, in my experience, has not been that way. A lot of the poultry veterinarians that I've met tend to be old white men who are precious as they can be, but at the very same time they are phasing out of their current careers, and I think this is a huge opportunity for me and as well as a lot of other people to go into this position, work with the animals that go directly to our grocery stores and feed the families of millions of Americans and other people worldwide, and specifically working with chickens and turkeys and poultry in general. You are providing some of the most vital protein sources that we have as human beings, and this is a really, really necessary opportunity for people to be caring for those animals that are going to wind up in the grocery store and are going to wind up feeding people's families.
What will you do if you don't get into vet school?
I'm going to go work in the industry, put my heels down and start running, because I really and truthfully, I don't expect to automatically get in on the first time. What are you going to do if you fail? You're going to try again. That's what my mama always told me, and I'm going to get my hopes up, but I'm not going to put them so far that I can't bring them back down and humble myself. And if I need to work on any specific part of my hours, I'm going to try and go for that. I have a lot of food animal hours as it is, working just with the animals, not necessarily in a clinic. So I could potentially work with a poultry veterinarian, because clinical hours with poultry veterinarians is a little bit different. You're out going to the different houses, doing a lot of research, things like that. And that's not necessarily sitting in a small animal clinic caring for cats and dogs, which, don't get me wrong, is extremely necessary as well, because people's pets are at a whole other level. I mean, they're part of our babies, just like our human babies are. My dog Winchester, he is my whole entire life. But my Gilt Sage, she's huge, and quite frankly, she's one of my babies too. So I have kind of an appreciation for both.
Who do you turn to if you're stressed?
I turn to a few different people depending on what I'm stressed about. When I'm stressed about school, it tends to be some of my friends who are taking the same classes as me. Sorry. Trying to go in and look at what they might be learning if they're in the same classes as me, especially, or if it's something to do with home life, I will go to my mama, because she is a kick butt woman who ain't afraid of anybody, quite frankly. And y'all might be like, ain't, she's done said a country hick word if I've ever heard one. But y'all have to understand, I grew up on a hog farm, can't come from the rural part of North Carolina, if you can ever say there was one. And I'm born and bred North Carolina, and you can tell automatically. But no matter who I go to when I'm stressed, I go to them as a place of solace, and I feel a lot better just before I even get it out. I'm a people person. I love to talk to people. I love to talk to y'all. I love to talk to anybody. So unless I'm trying to study, then I have to be by myself. Otherwise, I'll just talk and talk and talk. And then that might be a problem, because I'm not going to get any studying done. But I'm going to try and turn to my mama or my friends or anybody else, and I'm going to look up to them and find what I need so that I can keep going and keep persevering.
Have you ever castrated an animal?
I have. So growing up working with hogs, I've castrated a lot of hogs and helped castrate a lot of hogs. And I've seen it done even more times than I could count, quite frankly. We have a small residential hog farm, and my uncle does a lot of things himself because he's been in the industry, I don't even know how many years. But I think that those little piggies, when they're screaming, your ear's about to bleed, and we're just thinking, okay, you are going to make some sausage, but we just got to get you there first, because sometimes their noise is just a little bit loud. But that's one good thing about working with with pigs, and that's another reason why I specifically don't want to go into swine, but would rather go into poultry, because they aren't quite as loud. I've worked as an intern at Tyson Foods, and I'm actually going back for another internship with Tyson Foods again, working in live operations. And I've seen those chickens. I've seen them in houses of 36 to 40,000 birds, and that's a lot of chickens. That's a lot of broilers, but they are nowhere near as loud as a few pigs that are being castrated.
Describe a difficult or sad case and an uplifting case that you have worked with and how you responded to each of those.
Okay, so a difficult case that I had to work with was actually my gilt sage. Her name is short for sausage. We do raise animals for consumption. This is, again, a necessary field, but I got her from a special event, and so she was separate from all the hogs, and she became more like a dog than a pig, which pigs are extremely smart animals, and as soon as she heard the golf cart or the four-wheeler coming from half a mile away, that hog would be just squealing, she'd be talking to me, and she would near about break her whole entire pen down trying to get to me, because she, even when she was 570 pounds, she would roll over and she'd be ready for me to scratch her belly, even if she'd roll over on top of my feet and my feet would immediately go to sleep, let me just tell you. But Sage actually got really sick when in her second year of life. And we were originally going to keep her for a breeding sow, but we decided not to because of a few other complications we had with her, and not to mention she was just a big old pet, and she didn't like pigs that much. She just liked humans because we raised her separate. So we decided to end up putting her down and using her for meat production. But that's not even the difficult case. The difficult case is whenever she got sick. I was so attached, and I had never been attached to an animal like this. And I was like, my pig's gonna die. So I got down in the mud, I got down in the hog poop, and I got her up. And we called some of our friends and a vet, and he said that he thought it was a certain thing, or some other different mixture of things that was wrong with her. And I tried a lot of different things. We ended up giving her a lot of different shots and immune support, different things, because she was my baby, and I wasn't quite ready to let her go yet. But we ended up, it took me over 2 weeks to get that hog back to her normal self. And had it been for a strictly she was suffering the entire time perspective, I could not have done that. I would have had to have humanely euthanized her. But luckily, after I gave her the first set of shots, she started doing so much better, and it took her a few days to get back up and walk around and not be limping really bad, because she'd been laying down. She had made herself a spot, and she wasn't getting up for a hot minute. So she had her muscles were all asleep for a hot minute, but she got better, and it just made our bond all the more special, and it just went to show me, if nothing else, that especially working with food animals, but working with all animals, that you have to have a special place in your heart for them. But at the same time, you can't completely and utterly let your love for an animal, whatever the animal is. I love a chicken just as much as I love a dog. I have a lot of appreciation for them. I love my chicken tenders from Bojangles. I'm not going to lie, but you have to recognize that you put them in a certain position in your heart, and you put them in a certain position in your mind to really and capture what they are for, and so that way it prevents you from getting too attached. But then a really uplifting case was my grandma's dog, Tanner Joe, and this dog is a meanie if I've ever seen one. He's a little miniature dachshund, black and tan, beautiful as he can be, but he is a sassy pants. And he he got into some rat poison, and we didn't know it because we didn't know that one of my other uncles had put it out in the barn, and Tanner Joe snuck off in the middle of the evening and got in the barn and got into it. And so my grandma, she didn't really have the funds to pay for this dog, and I didn't specifically treat him, but I was there emotionally, and I was really working hard with him, and she she didn't really have the funds, so my mom and I chipped in our savings, and we took him to the NC State Veterinary Hospital, and we had to pay a lot of money because this dog had to get blood transfusions because he was so far along, and he, bless his heart, he was so appreciative that we took him to the vet. I've never seen a dog's eyes light up anymore. And before that, Tanner Joe would not touch me. But with me taking him to the vet, taking him back home, and then caring for him afterwards while he was still recuperating, it truly just, it uplifted me, and it showed just how much animals think of us. Even though we think of them as our babies, I mean, Tanner Joe, I wouldn't have thought like me at all. He tried to bite my face off every time I saw him from the get-go. And that could have been because I was the one who gave him 3 baths when he came home with fleas the first time. But I don't know. But yeah, those are my cases.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome.
Okay, so first off, what will you do if you don't get into school?
If I don't get into vet school, I would definitely like to apply again. I would take the year off and try to build up my resume. Probably try to also diversify my resume, because at this point I don't have a lot of experience in different fields. Like, I have mostly companion animal medicine, and I feel like that could be a detriment to me. So if I don't have livestock or exotic, I feel like I could definitely do better by having a variety of experiences. So I'd probably try to take the year, seek out as many different ones as I could, and then also just get as much experience and probably travel if I could, because I know that being veterinarian is a very commanding career, and that I wouldn't probably have time to travel like once I get started in study and starting my career. And I think it would be a good idea to see a little bit of the world, get a little cultured before I start getting on the grind.
Alright, how do you decide which vet school to go to?
Cost is a big thing. I am an NC resident, and I would prefer to go to NC State for cost because it's the cheapest option. I've also looked at St. George's in the Caribbean because their cost comparison is relatively the same to NC State's as in-state tuition. So if I didn't get into NC State, that would be a good option for me. I get to see a little bit of the world. It's not as costly as some of the out-of-state tuitions. I think that would be really cool and definitely be a different experience for me that not a lot of people have. Cost is the main thing, but then also I like the southern climate. I like to be where it's warm, don't want to be anywhere cold, and I also don't want to be more than like a driving distance away from family unless I went to the Caribbean. If I was going to stay in the United States, I like to be close enough to go home, because I can understand that the vet school would be very difficult and I'd have hard times, and I feel like that support of family would be really nice to have. But if I were to go to the Caribbean, I think that would just be something so special I could call. FaceTime is a wonderful thing.
Okay, so who do you turn to if you are stressed?
Most of the time it's my parents. They've been very supportive of me, my academic career, and I've been super nice about trying to help me pay for school, and any help they can give me, they have. When I was up late studying, sometimes they'd stay up too, just watching TV, just so I didn't feel like I was all by myself. But I also have a really good friend who goes to Appalachia, and we don't get to see each other very often, but we definitely use each other as like our support person. I call her whenever anything's wrong, she calls me, and I think that that's a good person to have, just someone like, you know, that there's no judgment. No matter what's happening, you can call them and they'll stop what they're doing. They'll be like, I'll listen to you, and I just think that's really great.
What do you think of euthanasia?
I think it can be a great thing for an animal that's in pain. I feel like no animal should have to suffer through a disease that they don't deserve, and I feel like it can be very helpful for them. I think it's important. I don't think it should be used for healthy animals. I don't like the idea of them using the shelters to make room. I know sometimes with the population control, it's a choice that has to be made, but I prefer if there were no animals killed in the shelter, but you can't live like that. But I think it can be very helpful for animals who need it, but I would never euthanize a healthy animal brought into my office just because someone was sick of putting up with it.
Okay. Have you ever castrated an animal?
I have not. I have seen it done. Like I was in the veterinary medicine competition with the FFA in high school, and we had to learn about certain like clinical practices like that. So I've seen it done in like videos, and like we basically practiced on stuffed animals. So like I have done it on a stuffed animal, but I've not done it for real. Like I know the process, and I've seen the videos, and I would really like to do it. I think it would be such a neat thing to do.
How do you deal with stress, and have you ever lost your cool?
I've definitely lost my cool, but not in public. This school is very stressful, probably the most stressful thing I have going on in my life currently. And if I get to a point where I'm very stressed, I like to take a step back. I like to write. I write poems and like to read. So most of the time if I'm really stressed, like I'll pick up a book and I'll just like try to lose myself in that for a little bit. Or I like to write poems to help me deal with what I'm thinking. Like if I'm thinking and I can't figure out how I feel about something or how I'm dealing with something, if I write it down, sometimes I find out how I feel and what's the best way to move forward. And that's really just like something good for me, because you have to focus on it, especially if you want it to sound good. You need it to like put all your energy in it, and that takes me away from whatever is stressing me out in the moment. So that's usually what I do. And when losing my cool, I always make sure that I am by myself, and it's nothing like no one's ever hurt. Don't hit anybody. It's just like you need to take a moment to almost like just yell at the top of your lungs, and then you're okay. Just take a deep breath.
Okay. Describe a particular experience, whether it be through research or through working in a clinic, and tell us how it's contributed to your future goals.
I have worked at a small animal clinic this past summer, and whenever I can go home, I've worked. The experience itself is just, the vet let me shadow her. Like I would walk into cases with her, and she would brief me before I walked in. We'd come in, I'd take notes on what was happening, and then afterwards she'd sit down and she'd talk to me, made sure I understood what she found, how she was diagnosing, and what she was going to do for treatment. And that really helped me just solidify that I wanted to be a veterinarian. Like seeing the whole process, like I've always loved animals and have thought it's what I wanted to do, but seeing that like process up close, like here's what we have to use, what does it mean, how can we fix it, what tests can we do, and that just really helped me solidify that that's what I want to do. But being in the small animal practice, I also realized I don't want to work with small animals. As much as I love them, I love my dog more than anything, I want to do something different. I didn't feel like what I was passionate about. I like the process and I like the idea. I would personally like to work with larger animals.
How do you plan on dealing with the expenses associated with that school?
Loans. My parents are going to help as much as they can, but I am the oldest of 3, and my sister goes to college next year, and my brother 2 years after that. So they have a lot. They can't help as much as probably other people could, because they have 3 of us and you can't really do that evenly. So it's just, I will be taking out loans, I will be working. I'm working now at the vet clinic, and I'll be working through vet school to help put myself through.
Gotcha. So what do you feel diversity and inclusion means to you?
Diversity, I feel like, means more like a diverse of experience. I feel like everybody comes from a different background, whether it be gender, race, ethnicity, or just where you grew up. All of that is different. Like some people come from the city, some from the country, and I think all of those things make everybody like diverse in their own way. I think that's a good thing, and I think that inclusion just means having all of those people in an area where they can respect each other. I feel like it's not like we're just going to throw you all together and see what happens. I feel like inclusion is when you can really respect someone for their differences and have a good relationship with them.
All right, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.